This is a headshot in Marvel Rivals, and everything you know about aiming is probably wrong. Let me explain. I'm actually going to drop 8 major aiming tips that will help you be immediately better at aiming, and these aren't the typical aim training or aim coach tips that you'll see online, because let's be honest, we are not trying to go pro. A lot of aim coaches get that wrong. We just want to improve our aim enough to play more, win more games, and rank up with relatively little time to play. We can't no-life this game, we've got lives. So how can we improve our aim effectively without spending 59 years in aim labs? Here's how. Now, here's a quick sort of starter tip. This is an appetizer before we get into the actual sort of meat of the video. Yeah, the bullets in this game travel from your character, the hands of the character, or wherever the weapon is, and not the crosshair. So basically, you can hit shots like this, and the further you get away, the more closer it's going to be to your crosshair. Like, I can still hit here. Like, I don't have to aim on target. Even if I aim slightly to the right, I'm going to hit, right? I mean, as I go further away, this becomes less and less true. But as I get closer and closer, it becomes more and more true. So that's something to consider. Now we'll get into the actual tips. So the number one tip really is quite obvious, and I'm going to set this up to just showcase. It is simple as just sometimes stand still. Standing still means that you don't have to counter for your aim. Look, this is what happens when I'm moving this way. My aim is obviously going to go this way. If I keep my mouse still, my aim basically travels with me, right? So if I want to hit this target, and if I'm moving this way, I now need to move my mouse all of the way this way, right? And at the same time, track for their movement. Now, with some practice, sure, we can get good at that, it's no problem. But once players start to move around, and let's just start with some slow movement to try and explain this a little bit better, it becomes far harder to track this target whilst also moving ourselves. As you can see, like, it's possible, but far harder. Now, as you play more, you're of course going to get good at strafing and dealing with shooting as you strafe, right? But if you just stand still, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to shoot. Because now you've only got one variable, which is the player itself. You only need to focus on the player moving, right? You don't have to focus on yourself moving. Now, if you stand still all the time, you're just going to die, right? So you can't do that all the time. My suggestion is strafe like normal, but once a player gets low health and you feel like you could go for the kill, stand still and then focus on shooting. Because at the end of the day, they've already got low health, and if you've got full health, it doesn't matter if you take a bit of damage to secure that kill. Instead, if you try and strafe around like crazy and pressure yourself when that player's almost dead, you might be like, oh god, it's almost dead, and you start overshooting your aim, and then they get away and you have to reload when they're on 1 health. There's a sneaky little trick that developers use to keep games a little bit more exciting. Most developers will balance weapons based on the average accuracy. And what that means is they'll look at how accurate the average player is and give you the amount of damage per magazine to just almost get a kill with it. Now, if they make the gun have too much ammo, the majority of players will one clip get a kill without reloading far more often. But if they make it too weak and not have enough ammo, then very few players will ever get a one clip and it will feel like the weapon is really weak. The perfect balance is finding the kind of average accuracy and tuning it around those values so that you'll occasionally get one clips if you get really good aim, but otherwise you're going to struggle, right? So we need to play around that ourselves and improve our aim just a little bit above the average to be able to secure headshot kills, right? And that is as simple as just staying still at the end of your mag to secure those extra kills. Now, the next thing is actually counter-strafing. Now, when it comes to aim training, a lot of people say counter-strafing is a lazy way to improve your aim. Let me explain what counter-strafing is. If I strafe in the same direction as this player as they move, I suddenly don't need to move my aim as much, right? Counter-strafing is basically following their strafe pattern to the T so that we don't really even need to move our mouse much at all. I'm not really moving my mouse much here. I'm just following their strafe and then micro-adjusting my aim. Now, that is technically a lazy, cheap way to get better aim. You're not training your aim. You're not getting better at tracking. necessarily, but guess what? It does the job, especially in a game like this where things are fast-paced, there's abilities going all over the place. And I'm not saying you should do this all the time, because when you rank up, you will certainly start to fall off. You definitely need to do some practice with tracking, and you can do this, like I say at the end of the video, we'll talk about how we can practice that. But sometimes just doing a bit of counter strafing just means that it's so much easier to track the target, right? It's so much easier to just be like, right, I now don't need to move my aim much. If I just focus on this, it's going to be so much easier, right? And by counter strafing, it actually does a nice little trick to your brain. Here's the thing, right? This is going to move into my next topic, which is about crosshairs. A lot of people will focus right on the crosshair itself. Now, that's a really bad way to play. If you're looking at the crosshair, you're going to struggle to see what's going on around you. Instead, you should be putting all of your focus on the actual enemy itself. And then, it's a much easier way to adjust your aim, because at the end of the day, your crosshair's in the center of the screen. You know where it is. That's always going to be there. The player, on the other hand, is moving all over the place. Now, when we combine that with counter-strafing, you need to focus very hard on the player itself to look at how they're moving. So you're actually tricking your brain into focusing on that player as hard as you possibly can. Because to counter-strafe, you need to focus on every movement. So instead of focus on aiming first, try and focus on what they're doing. Look at their movements, look at their animations, understand how they go, and you'll start to predict patterns here. And you'll be like, oh, right, they move like this. They got an animation when they go back. They sort of jolt their shoulders back and forth. I can use that to learn how to track them, right? And then suddenly it becomes a lot easier to go like, okay, if I just follow them like this, I don't really need to aim much. I'm just counter-strafing and my aim's already in target. Just really, really great, right? Now, we've basically massively reduce the amount of effort we need to put in to track this target. And if things go badly and we go a bit off, we'll just stay still for a second and just readjust. So we can combine counter-strafing and standing still to basically cheat code our way into getting kills. Now, this doesn't mean you're good at aiming. You're just good at following other mechanics in the game. Aim training will come later. We'll talk about that later. So, first three things. Stand still more. Secondly, counter strafe, and thirdly, focus on the enemy and not the crosshair. Next thing, crosshair placement. The crosshair is very, very good way of knowing where your aim is going to be, right? But what a lot of people do is they might aim too low, they might aim too high, or they might not be in the best position. You can use cover, right, to line up your shots perfectly. So I see this player's here. I know that they're going to be there. So I know their target's there. As I leave this cover now, my crosshair's already going to be in their line of sight. This is a really great tool in third-person games because I already see them. I know when my crosshair is going to be in line with them. So let's make sure my crosshair is in line with them before I even peek, right? So when I go out into cover, I'm already like, I'm there. I'm in their aim, right? I'm right in their target, right? Instead of like going, right, I'm going to go out of the cover and then be like, okay, there's a guy there. Let me try and track them. Make the adjustments first. Put your crosshair where the enemy is going to be, depending on their height and the angles that you're holding. And then suddenly you don't have to move your aim much because your crosshair is already pretty much where it needs to be. So you're doing a lot of the guesswork for you. You're not having to really move your mouse much. The less you, even a controller as well, joystick, the less you move your mouse and joystick, the more accurate you're going to be. So setting yourself up in the right positions and angles first just means that less work for you, less effort, more shots on target. And now, as we step out, we can start to counter strafe. And, you know, we can start to shoot, right? It's really, really simple. So, that's the next thing. Now, the next tip is about predicting player movements. Now, I need to get different characters here to really showcase what I'm talking about here. Let us get, I don't know, let's say Mantis for now. And we're going to do quick movement with random, okay? One of the biggest issues in Marvel Rivals or shooter games where there's a bunch of different abilities going around and different characters, it's hard to track and use the same aiming tricks across the board because you might have Iron Man flying up here, you might have Spider-Man swinging through the air, you might have Venom and Hulk going this way and the other. So how do you learn to track all of these different things? It seems like it's so much effort to be able to get good at aim against every single target. Well, if we watch these characters here, will start to learn that even though their movement is random, they follow a set pattern. Their animations are set to be the same way every time. Every time they jump, there is a maximum height, there is a maximum distance that they'll travel through the air, and there's a maximum time they'll spend in the air before they drop down. So as you play, start to think about how the animations actually play on the characters. That's going to help you aim much better. And we can take this further when we go into different characters. Let's just say Hulk, for example. Okay? When Hulk is jumping through the air, look at how he jumps. It's very much the same animation every time. So it may feel daunting to try and catch a Hulk flying through the air, but once you realize that all you need to do is track the same movements every time, it never really becomes a aim training exercise. It is a memory exercise on how the players move. Even a Venom swing. Look at how quick this Venom moves through the air, right? But it always follows the same animations. When the Venom reaches the apex of his swing, Apex Legends, he will always do the same animation and spend the same time coming to the ground. And even if he activates his diving strike, it's the same animation set. There's no difference. It's always the same. Once you realize that, you can start to learn and predict how much a player is going to travel through the air. So it's no longer about you trying to focus on the target and perfectly get the aim right and all that. You already know. You've watched that character so many times. You've paid attention to their animations. You know how far you have to track them through the air and how fast, because you've seen it. Another great example is Black Panther, okay? Black Panther is one of the most annoying characters to track, and even I struggle. I think most pros do even. Like, a good Black Panther, right, is going to be like this. Bum, 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 bum. And what you're going to do in response to that is be like, oh, whoa, oh, 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 oh. But when you realize that a Black Panther is going to swing this way and then swing back, if you're standing here, right, instead of trying to catch up with him, we can just wait for him to come here, right? You can predict the animations and predict the patterns. Think of it like that, and suddenly you're not feeling so overwhelmed on tracking every single target. The final tip is to fire just a little bit less often. Now, you want to try and do as much damage as humanly possible in this game, but when you're just like firing all over the place, right, trying to track, and it just gets a little bit overwhelming. I'm actually going to turn this off now, but sometimes it's okay to just be like, right, I'm going to track this target, right, okay, I'm going to try and shoot them. All right, I'm going to stop for a second because they jumped, and then I'm going to start firing again. You don't have to fire all the time. You can slow it down and stop. So let's just kill this mantis. Let's reset the health a second. So we're just going to be tracking this target. We're going to be like, okay, we're doing some damage. Oh, I'm going to just stop for a minute, adjust my aim, and go again, right? And yes, that means they could get out-healed, right? You do want to try and do as much damage as humanly possible, but short pauses here and there to give yourself a bit of time to just release the grip on your mouse or joystick and reset yourself can be a really good way to improve your aim. So those tips there are the main ways to sort of tease yourself into getting better aim without really doing aim training. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get better as you're playing. I would suggest always coming in here and getting some practice in. Doom match is also a really good way to do it, but sometimes Doom match can be a bit frustrating because there's a lot of cheesy melee characters going around and it's just a bit frustrating, right? So what you want to do first is there's two sort of routines that I like to do if I feel like my aim isn't too great. We go Mantis, super fast, random at 20 meters. And then we go apply. So that's the first one. Okay. And I'll usually play Punisher for this. Hit scan AR. So it's pretty good, right? And then what we're going to do is we're just going to start to try to track this first, right? We're going to look at the target and we're going to try and track it on point, right? Step one, just trying to keep our crosshair on the target as much as possible. We're not even going to shoot because when we shoot, we add additional pressure to our fingers, which makes it harder to track. You know, it starts to get a little bit more difficult, right? So we just do this first run of just tracking like this. We're not even going to fire yet, okay? This is like the lazy man's method of just easing ourselves into practicing aim without it feeling too daunting, all right? And then once we feel like, okay, we got it, we're going to start trying to shoot now. So we're like, okay, we got it. I'm going to start shoot. I'm not even going to worry about trying to hit headshots. I'm not going to feel too bad if I miss, okay? I'm just going to start shooting and then feel for it, okay? May as well put this on for now. It's not important. You're just going to be like, okay, I'm going to start shooting. I'm going to stay still. I'm just going to track that target, right? I'm going to track the target, and I'm going to just try and adjust my aim while staying still, okay? Doing it like this, two-step process, right? Okay, and then after that, we're like, okay, I'm going to start moving now. I'm just going to do some basic strafes, okay? I'm just going to do some strafes. We're going to try and basically sort of counter strafe a little bit whilst going left, right a little bit. And now we're going to be like, all right, let's try and shoot whilst moving, right? And we can occasionally pause if we feel like it's getting a bit uncomfortable, right? Okay, and then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, we're hitting shots, right? Great. Suddenly it doesn't feel so daunting, right? The thing is that becomes most, like, aiming is pretty straightforward. It's just there's so much going on that it becomes overwhelming, and your emotions get in the way, you get a bit overwhelmed and all that stuff, right? So we add it step by step, and it suddenly becomes a lot easier and a lot more relaxing, okay? So that's great. Full auto. Done. Okay, now the next aim thing is really important. The character you play changes everything, and you can look at my crosshair video to kind of have a look at how different abilities and attacks are different in this game. For example, Hela is hit scan, so wherever you aim, it's gonna hit immediately. However, Moon Knight is a burst of blades that are basically going to have a really slow travel time. And even if you move, they start to kind of go off target a bit. So you have to stay still with each shot to be able to hit on target. So yeah, go get practice in with your actual hero and see how the abilities are different. Because we've just been practicing on Punisher. So now our aim with Moon Knight is kind of bad, right? Because I'm trying to hit on target. Oh, wait, no, that's not how we want to do it. We want to aim at the outer edges of this crosshair, and we want to try and slow our shots down so we're hitting on target like that. We want to be moving like this, right? So our blades are like actually hitting the same thing. So it's suddenly like, oh, okay. Now if we aim like this, we're going to be hitting more, right? Practice with Punisher first, and then practice with the character you actually want to play that game. That's it. Some aiming tips for Marvel Rivals that I think will actually help you. If this video did help you, let me know, and I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!